It's weird to me that a lot of employers are so cavalier about why people left and so willing to chalk it up to money, or they want to work with somebody they knew, or any excuse other than your organization did not inspire them or make them want to come work there every day. And it blows my mind considering what a loss it is. A loss of information, loss of time, loss of morale for everybody else. It's extremely expensive. And so I think when organizations are willing to take responsibility for retention, they will have different results. Right now, I don't see a lot of organizations taking responsibility. It's a lot of putting it on the market.
Welcome to Cybersecurity Heroes, an Iron Scales podcast about you, the heroes of cybersecurity. You're about to hear and learn practical and experiential knowledge in our conversations with security leaders and practitioners and other influential InfoSec stars, so we can become more cyber resilient and safer together. Cybersecurity Heroes is brought to you by Iron Scales, the most powerfully simple email security platform. And I'm your host, Brendan Rudd. And now, let's get into the show. Hey, Deidre. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Good to have you here. And thanks for taking the time to join us on Cybersecurity Heroes. So today we're going to talk about CyberSN and a bit about what's going on in your world. So before we begin, could you tell us a little bit about you, your background, and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Deidre Diamond. I'm the founder and CEO of CyberSN. We are where talent meets its match. We are a job matching platform for cybersecurity professionals with full service staffing services. We plan to transform how job searching is done and prove it in cybersecurity and bring it to the world for all professions. We have a broken job searching and matching system for sure. I'm also the founder of Secure Diversity, where we focus on bringing women into cybersecurity and helping them get in, as well as women who are in cybersecurity, help them what they need to grow and be promoted and get into more powerful seats.
Two super important topics, and I couldn't be happier to have you to walk us through that today. But before we jump in, can you share one fun fact about yourself?
Oh, yeah. I thought, okay, this is the funnest fact I ever get to share. It is in 1987, when I was 16 years old, I became a manicurist. And in Irvine, California, my high school offered summer classes for things, and how brilliant. So, but 16, I was making $65 an hour in 1993, because that's what a full set of acrylic nails cost back then. So, and that kind of money being made then was pretty epic.
And you obviously have the entrepreneurial bug at an early age, or so. Continue with your story and how did you arrive to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a student of sociology and criminal justice. I have a double bachelor, and I thought I would be a criminal attorney or a social worker. And when I got into that space and internships in my first job out of college, I really realized that it's a business that I'm not for, meaning it's a for-profit business, and it really isn't helping a lot of folks. And I was really struggling. And so I went and saw a career coach that I saw in the Sunday Times in the Orange County paper of Southern California. And there was a career coach for women. And I went, and she told me I need to be in sales and management. And so I interviewed and answered a little ad that said, "Can you think on your feet?" And I ended up working for two serial entrepreneurial men for 21 years and built 3 companies with them. And one of them is Motion Recruitment. It's over $1 billion today. The other one's Rapid7, which is a public security software company, as we know. I've had a career that is very, very rare. I think it's rare beyond just the story I've told you. We'll get more into it as we go, in that I worked in very equal environments for men and women.
That's awesome. So fast forward to today, how and why did you start CyberSN?
Yes. So those lovely men retired and they're a little bit older than me. And it was time to start something on my own. And I really loved the cybersecurity community. When I met them joining Rapid7 as the first vice president of sales, I fell in love with the community. They're my peeps. And so, social servants and want to do good and make change and calm, cool, collected, kind. I was like, and smart, so smart. So when it was time for me to do something, it was do something in software, or I loved staffing and I loved helping people, see the marketplace and show them I was really good at it. And so it was pretty obvious to me that I needed to take the people route more than the software route. And so that's when I founded CyberSN. And really interesting is that the minute I founded, meaning got started, I had left staffing for 10 years, went into software, then came back to staffing. And it was so different because of the digital revolution, having left it in 96, coming back to it when I came back to it 10 years later. It really required a software solution, which is why I built the job matching platform that we have today with the taxonomy that's really making a difference in the marketplace. So long story short, to say that I ended up doing both. We are a software company, and at the same time, we're staffing experts and solving a big problem that we have, which is it's too hard to find jobs. It's too costly for organizations to hire. And we're not doing a good job at retaining because of how broken this system and other things too. But it definitely ties into our poor retention statistics.
Yes, and I think this is a great sort of segue to, in your words and your experience, what's the current state of cybersecurity recruitment as someone who is at the heart and center of all of it?
Yes. Well, the current state is that cybersecurity professionals, like a lot of professionals, are working in environments that have low emotional, intelligent, skilled managers. And that is causing havoc on top of the havoc of increased breaches or increased attack, as well as the remote workforce and what that's done for security professionals. And so all of that on top of what is definitely still a shortage, where new to cyber people struggle to come in because there isn't succession planning in these organizations, because there isn't the budget typically for it. Until very recently, we're starting to see that change. And so the state of the marketplace is in stress, and those that have high EQ managers are doing great, are loving their jobs. Those that don't are looking. And nobody's leaving because of money. I will debunk that. When you get to an offer stage, money matters. And people are going to negotiate the best they can for themselves, and almost always are going to get a raise, and in some cases significant. And then when they go to give notice, they're going to use that as to why they're leaving, because humans don't want to tell other humans that they need references from, that they're not inspiring, or they're not fun to work around, or that their culture is no good. So, what's happening is also sort of that information isn't getting back to the organizations, and organizations are getting to think that they're losing people because there's a shortage and others are willing to pay them so much more. No, that's not what's happening. That's very, very small cases of what's happening. So there's lots of different things going on that's causing a stressed marketplace, a lot of burnout.
Definitely. So I want to rewind a second to what you said about low EQ and high EQ managers. What would you say candidates should look out for in determining whether someone has a high EQ or low EQ in the recruitment process?
Yeah. So what a great question. So from the perspective of taking a new position, the hiring manager is the most important person to have high EQ. So what's your experience talking to them? Is it warm? Do they feel like they care about you? Are they interested in you? Are they talking to you about how they're going to grow your career? Is that the conversation? Because if that's not the conversation, they're not high EQ. And you can also look at what's their track record, who's working for them, how long have they been working for them? Do they have people that have worked for them from the past now? Not to say that that's what we should all be doing, and yet it is a sign that somebody likes working for somebody if they're going to work for them again. So there's ways to check your gut maybe. But the bottom line is, if your gut says this person isn't all of those things I mentioned, don't work there. Just don't. I understand how hard job searching is. And yet, if one doesn't settle, one can find the higher EQ folks.
Coming back a second to your point again about it's not easy to get jobs. How do you recommend candidates actually even get a foot in the door, like even a response to sending out their resume? Because I'm not sure exactly the clientele that you support. There's entry level, there's junior and more experienced. I'm curious to know if you have different advice depending on the level that you're at. I would assume when you're more senior, you have less trouble getting a response from the recruiter. So perhaps we should focus on the entry level and junior folks.
Yes. New to cyber is the term I really am enjoying, because somebody could be coming out of a different profession. It doesn't mean that they're coming out of strictly school. So new to cyber has it the hardest, and they have it the hardest because of lots of things. So one, there's 45 job categories, right? Our career center has them all mapped out. And which one are they interested in and why? And knowing that information when one is interviewing or one is speaking to possible employers is really key. Instead, they're sort of open to anything because they don't have a lot of direction, and their schooling or maybe even some training that they took showed them that they learned pen testing, and then they learned stuff about risk and compliance, and they learned stuff about a SOC, and they learned all these different things. And so they're not sure. And so that comes up in the interview, and people think it means they don't know what they want to do. So we've got a challenge in helping these professionals sort of understand the landscape, picking a path, and then it's really comes down to pounding the pavement. There's nobody willing to pay an agency like myself to staff new to cyber. I've even offered it at cost, and it didn't make a difference. And it's mostly because these security practices, other than the Fortune 100, maybe the Fortune 250, they don't have the ability to absorb new to cyber. They don't have succession planning. You have to have somebody to teach them, to take them under your wing in order to bring somebody new to cyber. So those folks have it the hardest. They need to apply to everything. They need to talk to everybody. They need to have some sense of what they want to do and why they want to do that. And then they need to network and go to all the free events and go to that are digital, and go to open source projects and get involved and use LinkedIn and reach out. Be very aggressive with one search, meaning it's a job. Like, work it every day, unfortunately. That being said, we at CyberSN are launching a solution for new to cyber. I don't have the date. It'll be sometime before end of summer, where we will organize new to cyber professionals in a way for employers to find them. Because let's say I'm coming out of IT and I'm already making $125,000 a year, and I want to get into cyber. Well, I'm new to cyber, but I'm already most likely in an income bracket that's different than somebody coming out of school, let's say. And also I bring much more than somebody coming out of school. And yet you can't lump those two people together to be found, meaning somebody may want that. The one that's a higher salary, somebody may want somebody that's at a lesser. And so we have to even use that to match, because otherwise it's just like a needle in a haystack to make a match.
That's another interesting topic to dive into, which I don't think many talk about. From what I understood, that's one of the main challenges your platform is solving for, like that mismatch between candidate and the recruiter. Can you sort of break that down and explain to us what that means, this mismatch?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm 50, and for 13 years with 300 recruiters around me as the vice president, we worked a model on paper of matching. What's happened in the digital era is that focus is gone, because jobs are posted everywhere and content is free, meaning like to post a job costs a couple $100 a month. Whereas in my day pre-digital, it was $5,000 for the Sunday newspaper. You got a spot about this big of a paragraph, basically. 5,000 is about 15,000, maybe 20,000 now in terms of value of the dollar. So it was super expensive, and we had to write really good job descriptions. And now people can write pages of content. Everybody just cuts and pastes different crud from around the universe, and the job descriptions don't make sense. And so the average professional is a passive seeker. They don't hate where they're at, but they don't like it, but they also don't have a lot of time to job search. And so they go and they look at these job descriptions and they can't even understand them. And so they don't apply. And so what I said was, first of all, that's a problem. And then number two is like a security engineer to one company is totally different than a security engineer to a different company. I found when I founded my company, there was no common language around what a cybersecurity professional does. So we started there 7 years ago and built that common language. And then we built a job and profile platform where we use that taxonomy to create job descriptions, to create profiles so that we can match on that common language taxonomy of tasks and projects that cybersecurity professionals are doing now, today, in the past, i.e. a resume, we call it a profile, and then or employers using that same taxonomy to say, this is what I need the person to do, not what I think their background should be. A job description is what task, what project, what percentage of time. And all of that is controlled and no cutting and pasting, and it makes it super easy. And then, of course, on the back end, we have matching algorithms based on income, based on degrees, based on citizenships, because there are criteria that employers have. And so we take out the noise. There's other things that it's based on, but my point is that the matching that we do takes out the noise that is causing recruiters to get overwhelmed. And also, it takes out that the recruiter doesn't have to do the matching. I mean, there's just no way we can train recruiters to understand all these 45 job categories. Even in like defense, there's 13 different types of roles. You know, like you can't teach a recruiter that. We don't want to. A recruiter needs to be able to understand it enough, but not be the matchmaker on the tasks and the projects. And so we took that out of the way and have a solution that can do searching and matching so the recruiters can do the managing the process, selling the organization, helping put the offers together, the right offers, closing the process. And so it's in play, and we're loving giving our clients a different service as well as taking care of the professional.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm also hearing some themes that we spoke about, soft skills and hard skills. If the recruiters don't have to focus on the hard skills, they can focus on the soft skills, which I think from what I'm hearing, a huge problem in cyber today is that sort of uneven distribution of high EQ, low EQ.
You're brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That's right. They can focus on making the match of personalities. Just because somebody doesn't have the same EQ skills, or let's say personalities matching, focus on that. It is true. I work on teams and we're not all the same personalities, and some personalities mesh better. All personalities can work together. Some mesh better together. And so to be a part of getting the best match on personality and culture and money in total compensation. It's not just about the base salary. There's a lot to really figure out. So yes, brilliant comment.
Sticking with this for a bit, if recruiters can also focus less on the hard skills, they can also focus on diversity and inclusion. And this is another area that I think you have a lot of expertise on. So maybe I'll set the stage. I watched an interesting webinar, maybe it was a couple months ago. It was called Human-Centered Communication with a guy called Pablo Gonzalez and Ethan Butte. He works at BombBomb. And I learned that women, when searching for a job, will look at the requirements and only apply if they feel they meet 70% of the criteria, versus a man who will apply if they think they hit 30% or less. So as a woman, can you relate to this? Is this a big thing still today? And is the solution or advice as easy as saying, well, you should just apply?
Yeah, it is statistically very true what you're saying. Since the hashtag #MeToo movement started, I feel like women have had more of a place to hear other women speak and give them confidence. And therefore, I think we're starting to see more women apply to those jobs versus dequalify themselves, because that was the common thing to do. And that's also why qualifications in a job description to me are no good. I don't believe that these qualifications are accurate. I don't believe that they create a sense of what the job is. I think they focus too much there. So job descriptions shall not, in my opinion, have that. It should say, here's what the job is. Are you qualified? If you're qualified, are you interested? You know if you're interested, and keep it that simple. And so it's getting better. We've got work to do. And in terms of what job descriptions are doing for women as well, it's also the resume. So there's unconscious bias out there. We know that. It's also statistically proven. And so one of the things I love about our profiles is that the profile is anonymous and there's no name. I don't need to know somebody's name. I don't need to know their age. I don't need to know their race or their religion in order to job match them. What I need to know is how much money have they been making, because nobody's going to take less, and most likely not going to take less. And if they are, it's very little in exchange for something else. And so I need to know what that is. I need to know what they've been doing with their time at work. I need to know what industry that was in that they were doing, and for how long they've been doing those things is what I need to know. And then I just need to know if they have degrees or certifications, because some companies will only hire that and it's a must have and there's nothing I can do about it. So I need to know so I match correctly. And I need to know citizenship status in terms of will companies sponsor to work in the US or another country or what have you. That's all I need to know. So we took that all out of the profile to support, like, let's get unconscious bias out of the way. Now you'd think in a time where everybody wants to hire diversity that we wouldn't have to worry about unconscious bias. And yet unconscious bias is unconscious bias. It's pretty difficult to change overnight.
Yes, definitely. And you mentioned you were very fortunate to have worked with great folks. What can you share with other women that can give them the confidence or the playbook in order to be successful?
Lovely, brilliant question as well. So it's the reason I founded Secure Diversity is that I realized I represent the 1% of women that are tech founding CEOs. And if you add in self-funded, I've been very successful in my career. I have self-funded our platform and what we're doing here. And so you add that in and it's well under 1%. And so that disturbing awakening happened to me not long ago. I founded Secure Diversity soon after, maybe just months, believe it or not, because I didn't grow up in a family where I felt unequal. I didn't grow up in companies where I felt unequal. And so I wasn't in that conversation. And yet all of a sudden I realized it's everywhere else as I started getting back out into the community instead of being so infiltrated in our companies. And founding a company means I'm out and really embracing the universe and realizing I was stunned. And so then I, of course, started thinking about why. What was it that made it that I was able to do that? Well, I wasn't sexually harassed by the men that I worked for. I was given equal opportunity for promotions. Promotion criteria was well defined. It was super transparent. There was no way that somebody was going to get promoted over somebody else because it was all out there. And I got promoted over men all the time. And those men didn't mind because the numbers were the numbers and the results were the results. And they also were successful and taken care of. It wasn't as if they didn't succeed either. It's just that promotions were very transparent. And that was all a part of a culture that was nobody comes to work to fail, throw the rope over, don't leave people behind, get more people in the room, make the pie bigger, your assets are your people, be kind and loving and giving and create wealth together. Like I'm hearing this stuff at 21. Who's hearing that at all? Never mind 21. And then they did exactly what they said. And each of their organizations I walked in, number 17, number 18, it's not like these were massively grown. And yet we lived it. And it's been called bottled lightning. It's still called that. These cultures can have this when we have these clearly defined roles and responsibilities, promotions, such that equality happens and not allowing for inequality. I suppose a man could have been promoted over me because they have the power. That would just destruct a culture. And that's what's happening in corporate America. Things may not be super transparent, but people sort of know who's doing what, and seeing somebody being promoted over somebody else, it just destroys cultures, and it's still happening for women.
Do you think we're going to see a shift in this behavior towards women as Gen Z start maturing in the workforce? Do you see some leading indicators that will be the shift towards equality, diversity versus what we're seeing now with, like, say the older generation, perhaps?
I think so. And I think so because unlike my generation and many of, sort of the generations today that are out there, I certainly didn't grow up hearing about equality for women, what's happening to women out in the workforce and how they're being sexually abused or harassed or what have you. And so the younger generations have heard that. It's empowered them. They can stop it when it's happening because there's this whole platform for them versus the women before. And, we're so thankful for those women that were willing to speak up. Oh my gosh, it's going to for sure propel us. And so thankful for them, all of them. And so we will see change because of that. And we're also seeing change because, the stock market has put value on diversity. They haven't yet put value on inclusion, but they're starting to. And inclusion shows up in retention statistics because where there's inequality in a hot talent market like we're in today, there is no retention. You're not keeping those people that are diversity folks. They're not staying. They're going to get recruited out. They're going to answer the recruiting calls. Everybody's getting recruiting calls. The question comes down to, do they answer them? Do they respond? The stock market is now starting to value retention. So that means C-level folks, possibly board level folks being fined for diversity statistics or retention statistics. And so that's going to make a difference because we all know that it's all about where money is.
And it's a little sad that it had to come down to that.
You have to take it, really, it's no different than women's rights to vote. It didn't happen because
yes,
we wanted to give women equality. It happened you needed to win. So it is sad. There's no doubt about it. It's sad. And not just in the US, right? And so at the same time, there's a lot of wonderful men and women and folks of all genders who are out there really making sure that it's not comfortable for somebody to be unequal to another person. And so with that, calling out and holding a space for a different relationship at work and with each other is gaining traction.
So if we will come back to your involvement for women in tech and inclusion, diversity, from what you're seeing, what are some of the issues and reasons in 2022 that women are not wanting to get into tech, into cyber? What are some of the reasons today that the numbers are so low?
Well, it's still the case that a lot of schools aren't even talking about cybersecurity. And if they're talking about it, they're talking about it from one job category. And same thing goes for tech. Tech is super expansive.
Broad.
Yeah. And they're talking. And so the conversation in the education system is weak at best and definitely caters to boys in the conversation. We still have teachers doing that today, professors doing that today. So it is that kind of a problem. That being said, there's lots of really cool not-for-profits and just individual humans in general that are out there seeking to change that. So Girl Scouts has a cyber program that's infiltrating elementary schools. It's just brilliant. They have a tech program too. And so we're going to see that. That's sort of one of the easier changes because the government's been the first to regulate diversity and to put the fines in place and compliance and what have you. And so there's a lot of backing from government to have diversity. And so that's sort of the easier place. The harder place to solve this problem is putting women and growing women in positions equally to men and being promoted equally. There's still very few women in what I call the power seats, which is either the CEO seat or the CISO seat in powerful organizations too, which is a part of that criteria. So we need to focus there. for sure. And that space is challenged. We have a lot of organizations that still promote based on feelings and who they like, and it's a problem. It's such a problem that I at least a call a week, if not more, of a senior woman that wants to share what's going on for her at work in terms of unequal footing. And these are women that took a position knowing that the company cared about diversity. So it's the age old, it's not enough to speak the words.
Yeah, just because you have a badge doesn't make you official, like whatever your badge is all about.
Yes, that's not it. It's what's the culture like? Does the culture embrace equality? Does it have defined roles and responsibilities? Does it have a promotion criteria? Is there a conversation in the organization that is consistent about how we treat each other? In general, all genders? Is there a code of conduct for that? These are the things that I work within from my early 20s till today, a code of conduct of how we treat each other, of kindness and respect. And there's rules, and it doesn't matter what level you're at. You don't get to yell. You don't get to scream. You don't get to blame. You don't get to name call. You don't get to, do lots of things in the cultures I work in. And yet, that doesn't seem to be the case out. Again, why am I the 1%? Because a woman, a minority, needs that culture to be successful, because by definition, we're already the outsider. We're already the oddball. We're already the most different thing in the room that everybody wants to focus on or has an opinion on or just feels different with. And so if the cultures are already problematic for the dominating gender, which the statistic rates of retention at the dominating gender of men is horrific, then how is a minority going to plug in and be successful,
It's almost like the education piece is somewhat futile if it feels like a lottery, if you're going to actually make it to the top or at least achieve your aspirations. If it feels like a lottery, you can educate as much as you want. It's not going to solve the problem.
Yes, and I'm dedicated to that story of sisterhood, and not to say that I'm not dedicated to brotherhood. My company's probably 50-50 today. Waivers 55-50. I've always worked in companies that are multi-gender and equal. And it's just to say that because I am the 1%, I feel an accountability to do something and to help. And so I've got a lot more to do. This is just the beginning of what I'm going to be doing for women. But yes, we must get out there and point out where inequality exists so that people can see it. A lot of wonderful people don't see it because it wasn't there for them or for whatever reason. And so we need to help. A lot of people are feeling like maybe this isn't a problem, which is something we need to help with.
Tying this into the skills shortage, talent gap conversation, if you're going to add another obstacle to a percentage of the workforce trying to get in this case, women, you're chopping that talent pool down even more. So it doesn't do the industry any favors as well. But moving towards a solution, what would you recommend to women wanting to get into cyber, get into tech? Would you go back to your previous point around look for companies with high EQ and maybe invest more time in your research on the company to really make sure they walk the walk, they don't just talk the talk?
That's exactly the advice. And speak your mind. I tell people all the time, if what you are thinking and believing turns off an employer, well, then that's you vetting an employer. So be willing to externalize your internal thoughts, the things that you're thinking, be willing to bring them. The world is your oyster. There is a focus on hiring diversity. And while nobody wants to be hired because of diversity, that doesn't mean that you will be hired because of diversity. My point is just there's lots of opportunity, and allow yourself the gift of being aggressive. Being aggressive is not bad. It is not bad. It It is being owner of your career. So investigate what EQ skills are. I have videos on YouTube. I have in our website a lot of material. Really understand what they are so that you can look for them.
I want to circle back for a second to something you said about employee retention. And you said even amongst males, it's very bad right now. What can you speak to about the retention problem? What's going on there? Give us some of your insights from behind the scenes.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of things going on. One is cybersecurity has been underfunded forever. It's still underfunded. It doesn't have the same budgets that are needed for succession planning and for growing people so that they can be challenged and move into newer roles so that they're challenged and growing their career and their income. And so because that doesn't exist, cyber professionals are doing 2 or 3 jobs. So that's causing them to take recruiting phone calls. And they're going to go to an organization that says to them, we won't do that. Then here, let me show you how we're set up and why that's not going to happen. And not only that, we're going to invest in you. And here's how your career is going to progress. And so it's literally that. Those companies that are in the career conversation consistently and always are grabbing, or at least willing to be there now. Certainly all of our clients have to be willing to be there. We won't represent them, and it needs to be completely mapped out, or we won't represent them. But those that are willing to do that, they've got their picking, because that's what's not happening. These organizations are not in these conversations. And so that's the number one thing, is that they're overworked and they're not being invested in. And then the other thing that's going on is that most people are not going to go back from remote. And they're not going to accept being paid less money because they're remote in Alabama. And they don't have to accept that because other companies are willing to pay them San Francisco prices for living in Alabama. And so any place that's messing around with that conversation is letting somebody be fully remote or paying them differently based on where they live. Those people are leaving. And then the newer thing that we've seen recently that's a part of the Great Resignation, and really the retention issues were happening prior, without a doubt. It's just escalated like crazy. The third thing is vaccine requirements and whether or not they're being enforced. We've seen offers turned down because companies haven't made a decision on their policy, and people that are not wanting to get vaccinated are not willing to put themselves in that position and leave a job, or companies making a policy and saying that you have to be vaccinated and people quitting over it. That is also added to our already awful retention statistics. On average, 18 months at best. Not good.
You being the bridge between candidates and employers, like, what are the most successful companies getting right around the whole hiring experience, and what can you share from that?
Yeah. So they are looking at security holistically. They're looking at the entire landscape. They're mapping out all roles and responsibilities and who's doing what, making very specific job descriptions with us. And then they're in the career conversation from the first interview. And the first interview isn't about, let me grill you. The first interview is, let me tell you why I want you to be so interested in my company and working for me in particular, so that you'll put the time into being grilled. Those are the companies that are doing it right. And when that's done, it's a success rate. For us, every client we work for has a success rate, because we will not work it unless we're doing that. And because of that, we fill jobs that have been open months, years, in 45 days or less. That's the problem. I want to hire doesn't mean I just go post a job and now I'm talking to people. There's a preparation to include salary. And while sometimes this can't be gotten exactly right because it's a bigger company, you have to get into the compensation models, it has to be pretty damn close. Otherwise, people are wasting tons of time. So it's the organizations that are willing to understand that it's not about hiring people only, it's about retaining them. Therefore, retention means caring for them. So let me start there. CyberSN's made the match, so I don't have to worry about that, right? And things move.
I think people don't speak enough to the cost of employee churn. And that can be many reasons, of course, but curious to get your inputs on what's the main reasons why employees churn today.
It's weird to me that a lot of employers are so cavalier about why people left and so willing to chalk it up to money, or they want to work with somebody they knew, or any excuse other than your organization did not inspire them or make them want to come work there every day. And it blows my mind considering what a loss it is. A loss of information, loss of time, loss of morale for everybody else. It's extremely expensive. And so I think when organizations are willing to take responsibility for retention, they will have different results. Right now, I don't see a lot of organizations taking responsibility. There's a lot of putting it on the market.
Yes, according to the US Department of Labor, the average cost of a bad hire can be as high as 30% of an employee's first year earnings. However, one report from the CEO of Link Humans put the average cost as high as $240,000 in expenses. So that cost was broken down relating to hiring, retention, and pay. And this was a pretty recent article on apollotechnical.com.
That's right. That's so brilliant. Again, I love talking to you. You always have the most interesting questions and also have the data. You're dead on. It doesn't make sense. Let's start taking accountability. And accountability doesn't mean punishing. I'm not a big fan of it. What we need to do is invest in emotional intelligence skills training for managers. Anybody that's a manager is responsible for some other people's careers. That's a lot of power. It's a lot of responsibility. And what training does anybody get for that? Nothing. It's silly. I was in training every day. And then once I got into management, I was in training once a week. And then once I became a manager, I had managers in training once a week forever and still today. It's that serious of a job.
Other than just keeping your employees, if someone is sick or if someone leaves, like who's going to cover for those people if knowledge is not decentralized? Having all your key players or all your eggs in one basket, it's also not a great business strategy, right? I've been interviewing a lot of folks recently, and they all tell me that creating a training and onboarding program is not rocket science. It's not that difficult. You can really train someone up pretty quickly, and to do continuous training, it's also not that difficult and not that much effort. So I'm curious to hear from you what your training programs looked like, how much effort went into those, what were the sort of core pieces of that training and education.
I think the most important piece about training is consistency, meaning it has to be regular. The conversation of EQ skills or workplace conflict and growing and developing people and how to do all of that isn't a one-time training or even a two-time. It's a regular. So for us, we have what onboarding do we want for their first day and second day and third day, and certainly throughout their first week for the whole company's exposure. And then each department has their own program for training their professionals. And it's a constant conversation. It isn't a one-time conversation because we're growing people. We have roles and responsibilities defined, and you can't grow people from one job to the next job in 6 months to a year like we do, unless you're constantly in the training conversation, the career conversation, because you're giving feedback. Your training means feedback. Like it isn't just here's the information. It's they then applied it. How did it go? What happened? Constantly doing that. Having a conversation with somebody. How did it go? What did you learn? So for us, it's ingrained in just how we even all work together as managers, that we've been told and are willing to be accountable for that. Nobody comes to work to fail. So if there is a failure with somebody that we have on the team, we take that very seriously. It should be very rarely, and it does happen rarely, but that's how serious it is. So that when the managers are together, they're talking about how can I help your people? How can you help my people? That's the conversation. How can I help? Because they're given this framework of constant conversation of training. So I think that for bigger organizations, it can be more challenging. And yet, really, people work for people. It's all about the hiring manager and how they run things. And if the culture beyond that is extremely toxic, well, that could fail. But if it's just not so great, they can be isolated from that and have a great career and a great time working in a group. So I really encourage each individual hiring manager to own their own onboarding, regardless of what's going on, and then own their own training and make it consistent. And so part of that is just a weekly conversation with anybody that reports to you minimally for at least an hour. That's a lot where I do a lot of my training with my seniors. And maybe it's not even training, it's just supporting each other and giving advice. So it's not complicated. It just requires focus and time. And this is the problem. A lot of hiring managers don't have the time. They're also player coaches, or even if they're not player coaches, they just got so much on their plate. They can't get the time to care for their people. And this is why I'm saying we have to solve that. So like, for instance, if you're making a job description on our platform and it's a management position, there's how much time do they get to manage people? Like, we're making employers be in the conversation of, you can't leave that out, in terms of how much time they're spending on what. Depending on the size of the team, we'll give feedback of whether that's enough time or not.
Yes. And I think another huge piece that is maybe missed is that your happiest employees are your best referrals. And if they're happy, they're going to spread the word, bring like-minded people, quality people. I would imagine your success rate through a referral program is going to be much higher. And that only comes from having raving fans within the company.
That's right. And it's true. And I see it. I think the last 7 or 8 hires of ours were all referrals. That doesn't mean that we're only hiring people like us by any means. It means that people were willing to put the word out. People were willing to tell their friends, tell their family, tell whoever that this job exists. It's game changing for an organization to have referrals. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Before we wrap up, I would love to give you a couple minutes to share what CyberSN platform is all about, how it works, who it's for, why they should look into it. Can you give us a quick elevator pitch?
Thank you very much. I believe that we can solve the job searching and matching problem that we have in society today if every profession has their own job career center where they can get the support of job searching as well as career. And so CyberSN is now a one-stop destination to support just that. So we scrape in all cybersecurity jobs that are posted in the last 45 days, and we organize them in a way that professionals can match to them easily. And professionals, what I want is that all professionals in one place. When we have that, let's say all 1 million of us in one place, categorized with profiles, then employers will comply. They will use the job taxonomy and stop cutting and pasting and posting jobs that don't make sense. They'll spend the time making sure that they're ready to interview, and they'll follow suit because they also want a solution. They're just bogged down in their problems. And so what I want to say to everybody is, come check out what it means to make a profile and what CyberSN is doing at cybersn.com, and know that we're self-funded, lovers of society, want to change this game, see it as a vulnerability, see it as a national security issue. A professional staying in their job, unhappy is a vulnerability. And employers not being able to search and match easily and find each other is a vulnerability. We've done it in the dating business, and we've crushed the divorce rates and turned them upside down by our dating apps like eHarmony and such. And we can do it in employment, and we can prove it in cybersecurity, and then we could take it to everybody. This is the age of technology and data, and it should not be the way it is today. So join us. And we love feedback. We love anybody that wants to get involved. I'm always happy to take a call.
Thank you for sharing. And I really love the dating app analogy. That was awesome. Super cool. So one last thing before we kind of wrap up here. Is there anything else you would like to share that perhaps I didn't ask you that you would like to share before we close out today's episode?
When I think about the marketplace, I also think about just having fun. And so I really think that we all can use a lot more fun these days. And so I would encourage folks to join groups and get involved. It's very easy to be isolated in what we're doing. If anybody's looking for a group that might fit them, I'm happy to help. We have a provider center where we're starting to organize that data of not just groups, but anybody that's got anything to offer a cybersecurity professional. How do we organize that to better their career, to better their life? So I just want to end with have fun, find ways to have fun and get involved with the community. And if you want some help on that, reach out to me.
Yeah, I can attest to that. The cybersecurity industry is booming with communities, and a lot of positive communities are popping up, I think, on a monthly basis. So it's really exciting to share and to see the camaraderie in the industry. So it's really nice to see.
It is. We have a wonderful community, social servants, willing to give, willing to help. If you haven't gotten connected yet to that, I'll get you there. Reach out anytime.
If anybody would like to connect with you, what's the best way for folks to reach out?
dd@cybersn.com.
Awesome. And are you active on LinkedIn or Twitter or any other?
Both.
Awesome.
Yep.
We'll make sure to include those in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Deidre, for taking the time to chat with us today on Cybersecurity Heroes. And to the rest of you, we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you again.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cybersecurity Heroes. Practical and experiential knowledge on a day in the life of security heroes. Catch our next episode by subscribing or following through your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, please leave a rating for the show. They really help a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.